Hi there, welcome to the Bonsai Sup podcast. Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu, and welcome to autumn 2026. It's here, we've ticked the calendar over. It's now time to get cracking on whatever's meant to happen in your bonsai yard during this autumn period, which I'll certainly give as much help and advice as I possibly can as to what I'm doing around the yard to try and make sure that my trees can be the best they possibly can be. I am glad to be shutting the door on summer. I'm looking forward to next summer already, but I'm glad that this one's done. The nights, there's been a few colder nights lately, which has been great. It means I'm one step closer to being able to light the fire and sit around and enjoy the warmth from that. But for our bonsai, it's a really important time. Autumn is one of the major ones. They're all major, but there's certainly a list of things we have to try and get through during the autumn period. For now, I'd be focusing on getting ready for fertilising. I wouldn't be stressing too much about any of the other stuff just at the very start of autumn. But I know tea bags have been getting made around my place for the last week and a bit, trying to ensure that I'm ready to give them as much as I possibly can. And it's go time. It's maybe not necessarily time to be fertilising on pines that have been decandled, your black pines that have been decandled, because they may still be growing. And I'm sure that anyone's decandled black pines like me, you over the last couple of weeks would have looked at them and gone, wow, those needles are really starting to push out now. Now's their time to start setting things before they go to dormancy and it starts to really take off. And the trees that I looked at and thought, geez, they're a little bit behind now, they're starting to catch up. And the ones that were sort of caught up are really starting to plump out, which is great. Happens every year. I have the same worries, same as everyone else that listens to the podcast that sends me messages worrying about it as well. But it definitely is a nice relief when you do see those needles start to push out and start to grow and the buds start to form nicely. And you really get to see the benefit of decandling and why we don't muck around with cutting buds early than when they've stopped growing. You know, there's one I took a photo of. I should actually put it up on my story on Instagram, Facebook, just so you can have a look. But it shows well and truly there's one enormous bud on there, and then there's two really small, nice sized ones that will develop to be the perfect size from a ramification. But all the juice for this branch is going into this one big large one, and if I'd removed that earlier, then the ones that were left over would be completely destroyed. So it just sort of just reaffirms for me that just stick with the course. There's a million different ways to get to the end result, but if you're just consistent about how you do it, then you'll achieve what you expect to achieve with your trees. Anyway, moving on from autumn to talk about the podcast. I was up at the National Bonsai Collection in Canberra a while back, and I was just listening to people talk as they walk through the collection. They may have no idea about bonsai. It may be their first exposure to it. Who knows? But there was a lot of talk, a lot of consistent talk about people about the age of the trees, and that they were surprised that they're not even that old. So I want to just talk about bonsai age, and is it all it's cracked up to be, and what we can do and what our responsibility is, I suppose, when we work with our bonsai about the perception of age. But anyway, let's get into it. Should be an interesting chat. So there's a group of kids, the ones that really made me think about this from the point of view that maybe it's something to have a chat about. And I've talked about the characteristics of age on bonsai before, but this was more kids running around saying, let's find the oldest one. And then the parents would be with them, or the guardians or whoever they were would be with them, and they'd be walking through the place and they go, look at that one. That's not even that old. It's like, they go, it's only 25 years old. It's like, that's 25 years of care. And it would bring a smile to my face. And then there would be talk, they'd be, look at this one. This one's 50. Look at this one. I found this one. It's 54. It's like, yeah, okay. So bonsai in Australia is at the point where it's deemed to be young. It sounds funny saying that, but it is on the infancy side when we compare to Japan, or China, or lots of Asian countries. I'm not being exclusive, but just when you think about bonsai and how long we've been practitioners of the hobby, it's relatively on the new side, but we're at that point with the knowledge base and the access to information that we can really accelerate and grow quite rapidly. So we do have limitations on the age of the material that we can get our grubby little hands on because of collecting laws. There are, there's variances to that. So you may be able to get access to older stuff around the place. But in general, a lot of the stuff that we work with in bonsai, it's relatively young. And, it's especially, well, if you acquire an older tree, I've got a Kunzia azalea that is over 100 years old in my collection. But as far as being a bonsai worked on and kept in a pot, it's possibly in the 15 to 20 year range of being classified as a bonsai. But as far as the age of the tree goes, it's over 100 years old, which is lovely. But whenever I'm asked the age of any trees, I give the same sort of comment back to anybody. It's, well, how old do you think it is? It's not really what the age stamp is on the tree. It's how old do you think that tree is? Because, but you come across a lot of things where people get asked the age of a tree, or you see something up for sale, and it's a 300-year-old tree or whatever. It's like, yeah, okay, that definitely not the case. Can't be like that. But then again, I've seen trees come through my workshop where you look at them and they're tiny little sticks, and they're, hear stories hand on heart that this thing's been alive for 30 years. And it may well have been, but it hasn't developed. The tree goes into that treading water pattern where it's, just doing what it can to survive, and doesn't mean that it's flourishing. So you might have a tree that's been really well looked after, really well fed, in perfect environment, allowed to grow massive sacrifice branches in it. It could be 10 years old, and you look at it and go, wow, that's a significant tree. That's got a nice trunk on it. Maybe it doesn't have, depending on the variety, the species and all the rest of it, but it may not necessarily have, all the structure that an old tree would have. But its trunk might be, quite nice, and you go, wow, if in such a short time that appears to be older than a stick in the pot. That's definitely, age stamped at being significantly older, 3-4 times older than something younger that's been given the perfect environment to grow in. So it's that whole perception of age that I suppose I wanted to talk about, because it can be not disheartening. It can be unrewarding. It can be a bit of a kick in the guts when you style a tree beautifully. It looks fantastic, and the first question you get asked is, "How old's that tree?" And you go, "It's 8 years old." It's like, oh, it's a baby, all right, and they move on. It's like, well, no, it's design. That's sort of what we do with bonsai is we create the perception of age through our styling techniques to make the tree appear older, to start the process. Like if you think about any tree, doesn't matter, natives or deciduous or pines or conifer, whatever, any kind of tree that you can possibly think about, then I want you to think about what makes that tree look old. And often it's because of the way, say, the branches appear on the tree. It might be that, a young tree sort of has the branches start to shoot up, and as they get older, those branches then start to bow down with the weight of the foliage and the length of the branch it's got. So they start to dip down a little bit, and then new shoots start to grow, and it starts to pick back up again at the end of it. So you get this feeling of age naturally from looking at trees going, wow, that tree's been growing that branch has been growing for a long time. It's got so heavy it's starting to bow down, and then it's starting to come up. So when we get in with our wire and our scissors and branch cutters and all the rest of it, and we set guy wires on branches. We're starting to pull branches down. We do it because it starts to feel like an older tree because of what we're doing and how we're imposing ourselves on that tree to say, well, yeah, sure, you are only young. That branch, yep, sure, it's only 2 years old, that branch, but I want it to start to feel like it's an older branch. I want it to start to give the impression of age, and we do that through the styling techniques that we use. And there's talk about the cookie cutter is a horrible term that I really don't like, but there's talk about that commonality or that consistency of approach with the styling of branches. Pine trees, they cut down acutely. Deciduous, they're sort of up and down. Natives, they're sort of up and out. And there's a bit of a spread on them. There's a very general thought process. They don't have to be styled like that, of course, but that's a general approach that you sort of, get to come across quite a lot. But the reason that tends to work. Work's not the right word. I'm going to be very careful because I'm not trying to, plow into you that they've all got to be done a certain way. But you get a feel, or the general public, the non-bonsai nutbags like us, they get a feel for how a tree is meant to look because of their mind memory. The way that they've seen trees in the past, that, they walk past a tree and they don't think about it, but they see that it's big, it's grand. They see the way the branches are falling down. Might be in a park, or, they drive past beside the freeway every day, or whatever it is, and they get a feel for how the tree looks when it's big and it's grand and it's old and, it's got crusty bark and whatever. And then we come along and we get a piece of material and we sort of style it that way too, because we've still got that memory muscle that kicks in for us saying, well, this is whether you like it or not, this is what I see. And it might be from images off your screen that you're looking at for trees, bonsai or trees or whatever it is, or it might be something you visit in the middle of nowhere when you're out bushwalking, or could be, like I said, it could be something you see every day at the front of your house on your nature strip. But it's that memory that we have that we sort of go, well, I'd really like this tree to look like this, and damn everybody else. But other people will have that same experience. They will pass and go, wow, look at that tree. How old is it? It's not, well, what do you think that? Because they get a feeling for the tree the way you've designed it that connects with them, that gives them that impression that it's an old tree, that it's a grand tree, and it might not be styled as a classic bonsai, but it doesn't have to be. It's just got to be something that provides that sort of kick in the brain that shows or gives that feeling of age, that perception of age. That's the most important. Natural aging on our trees is so important. When we talk about that, we talk about bark every single time. You might get things like lichen starting to appear on the trunks, really gives that feeling that it's a nice big old tree, but you can't beat crackly bark on trees. And one of mine that I've talked about a lot that really provides a memory back for me as a kid is one of my big radiatas where the trunks are a monster. It's really nice, and that plating bark is really coming along. Of all my trees, it's probably got the nicest plating bark that I've got in my collection. And, I walk past that and I water it every single day. And every time I cannot help but think about this instant of being a kid in a caravan park, being beside these things in summer, and just that happy memory. And, the shape of it, the smell, the age that it's got on this tree, it all brings back that feeling to me from this, childhood memory, which, may or not be 100% accurate anymore, but it's definitely why it pulls me back. But so natural aging on our trees, we can't rush that. And I've talked about many times before about why, there are horrible old techniques, prehistoric techniques that you could use I got told that you could use to be aging your trees, but it's not necessarily the way it goes. It's just time. But that feeling and the design and everything that goes with it is something that I put onto my trees, that you put onto your trees, and we grow them a certain way. Yeah, sure, there's the horticultural side, but it's that perception of age that we're really pushing for, no matter how big or how small the tree is, that we're struggling with, and we fight the natural urges of a young tree to say, no, you've got to grow like this, because that's what old trees do. Their branches come down like this. They open up, they spread out, they get to a certain point and can't hold the weight anymore. So they start to dip down a little bit. Creates interest. You may not necessarily know exactly why you're doing it first up, and you may not know why you're drawn into certain trees that you see photos of. Lots of kokofu from Japan coming around everywhere at the moment, which are incredible trees that have got some significant age on them. And there's that natural characteristic of age, but there's also the styling of age too, that the trees have been given over a very long period of time. And when we start with younger material, and by younger I mean maybe less than 1,000 years old, when we first start working with these trees, and they don't have that natural characteristic of age, we implement age on it, or we force age on it by shaping and wiring and whatever else. And then we need to wait. Then we need to go through the process of developing our trees. We talk about the stages of development: trunk, nebari, and then we get into the branching and the ramification down the track. So while we're doing sort of that trunk shape, and we're doing the primary branches and the secondary branches, we're building that perception of age with it, and then down the track they start to get older, they start to ramify, they start to get nice bark, and everything starts to look crusty, and that's when everything starts to take shape. It's more difficult getting a really old tree and then starting to implement the feeling of age on it, because the branches maybe don't bend quite so easily. You might be removing stuff that's grown in the wrong spot. Yeah, sure, your trunk's nice and old, but you sort of go backwards a long way, and then, which you can still do. I'm not saying you can't do it, but it fits and works easier for me getting something younger, styling that, and then just waiting, just putting in the time with this tree and doing the maintenance work and building the ramification and letting things happen naturally with your trees, letting that bark start to form, letting that crustiness start to appear, letting the surface roots really start to take hold and start to look like they're reaching out for the edge of the pot and starting to bark up themselves. That's when things really start to work with our trees. It's an interesting concept. So let's have a bit of a break, and then we'll come back to it. Bonsai is a little bit like magic to the non-bonsai world, non-bonsai population. We take a special seed off a very important tree that's designed to grow in a pot with very, very nice foliage and fine branching. We sprinkle a little bit of black magic on it somewhere along the way, and presto, and you hear it all the time. Oh, I can't do that. I can't do bonsai. I had one once that died, killed it. But, realistically, once you've got the foundation set available to you, bonsai is for everybody. Absolutely. And everyone in the world, I thoroughly believe that if everyone in the world did bonsai, maybe it would be a better place. I guarantee it'd be a better place for a lot of people, because it's so good down to your core. And we with bonsai, when we're designing it, we do it to create interest. And if you look back on yourself, on your journey with bonsai, you were smitten at the start. You most likely still are, like the rest of us, but you're smitten with these trees at the start, and you do it to create interest, and you're shaping things, and you're learning techniques, you're making mistakes, you're doing all that stuff that goes with it. But we get to a point where we have to ask ourselves a question, and it's simple. It's like, what do you aim for when you're developing your bonsai? When you're taking a piece of material and you're starting to apply wire to it, or you're making trunk chops, or you're doing whatever, you're doing it so it looks old. When you put wire on it and you start bending your branches out, are you doing it so it gets the perception of age, or one day will look like an old tree? Are you doing it just because you've seen an image of a tree, which is fine? If you've seen the image of a tree, go back and look at that image and go, why do I like that image of the tree? Is one of the things in there because it looks like an old tree? Is it because you want it to be pretty? And that's honestly, most of my trees that I work with, I do it because I want them to look pretty. I want them to look nice. I want them to be attractive. I want them to, but when you start breaking down, okay, well, what does pretty mean? What is being a tree that I look at and go, that's nice. That's really, really nice. That's a good looking tree. That's a good looking rooster, that thing. What is it that puts into the whole category of pretty for me and for yourself? It's really, for me, that it's got that feeling of being old. And it doesn't necessarily need to be that now, because, your first wire that you're putting on a tree, it might be a stick in a pot that you just get a straight little whip and go, okay, I'm going to put some bends on this. Why are you doing the bends? It'll be interesting. Why will it be interesting? Because as it gets older, this is what's going to happen. So it's like, oh, okay, so age is going to play a part in this tree. As its bark twists around and, spirals around, I'll be able to put, a nice shari line, some nice deadwood around that. So as it gets older, as it looks older, you're going to have something to work with. And that's that perception of age, that work that we do on the trees to get us to a point where when they look old, we go, nice, that looks good. And, a lot of us, especially here in Australia, or the young bonsai countries, New Zealand, whatever, the trees that you're working on now are going to come to fruition way after we're gone, way after we're dust. There's a lot of stuff that we can do with our trees to make them magnificent now, but just imagine what they're going to be like in another 50 years or another 100 years or another 200. Imagine if the tree that's in front of you on the bench right now that you're working with, no matter how old it is, imagine what that's going to look like in 200 years. You'll do the foundation work, you'll set the branches, you'll start working, you'll make decisions that will be with that tree forever. You'll be root pruning, you'll be setting up your nebari, you'll be forming a trunk line, picking primary branches, picking your first branch, picking the directional movement of the tree. Just imagine what that's going to look like with 200 years under its belt. My God, I wish I could stay. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll come back as a bonsai. But if we could stay in tune with these things, or get some kind of fast forward button to say what you're doing now is going to have a massive impact on it somewhere in the future. So it's really important that you have that long-term approach with everything that we do. And as I said before, like when you're designing your trees, sometimes it's, you don't necessarily have to put your finger on why you're doing something, or why why is this design important? Like, why am I doing this? Sometimes it's just a moment in time. Like I said before with my radiata, it's, for me, that tree, as soon as I came across it, I went, oh, that is it. That is that. Like, it was, it didn't have the bark it's got now. It didn't have the branch structure, didn't have anything, but when I first made the cut on it, that smell came to me and I went, oh my God, I'm there. I'm back being bloody 6 years old again, hanging around with a group of mates in a caravan park with bikes, and I'm smiling from ear to ear. So then I work very hard to capture that feeling. And look, I guarantee you this tree probably doesn't look anything like the tree that existed back then. But for me, it does. For me, it does. You get up, when I sit down low, I've got it high on a podium, and when I look up the branch structure, it's like, oh, there you go. I'm back to being a kid again. And it's that whole feeling of a moment in time that I've captured for myself, not for anyone else. No one else is going to look at that tree and go, oh, yeah, that reminds me of that seaside caravan park. That's never going to happen. But for me, it does. And that's, really, that's all I care about is how I feel with my trees. And that's how everyone else should feel about it as well. Side note, I got talking the other night with someone about pots, and the whole argument, people were pushing sort of pots for trees and what this person does and what that person does. It's like, whatever. I just do whatever I do because it makes me smile, and the reason I'm doing bonsai is to make me happy and make anyone that does bonsai feel that same way with their trees. So now, just swinging back again to the time at the National Collection, and people being disappointed when they found out the age of trees. it's made me think, maybe we should all be telling people that the trees are 150 years old, 200 years old, because why would you be attracted to a tree, look at it, love it, say that's fantastic, and then be disappointed by the age of the tree? I don't get that part. Like, it should be almost, okay, well, what age do you put on this tree? When you look at it, what do you think it is? And I'll look at it and go, wow, I don't know, 100 years. Yeah, perfect. It's 100 years then. You got it right. You win the bag of jelly beans because you picked the age of this tree correctly. When they look at it and go, oh, it's only 25 years old. Ah, next, move on. It's like, well, hang on. You were drawn in at one point. Why would you walk away from that now? And like, I don't begrudge people making up, ages for the tree based on, it's very hard to know exactly how old a tree is, even if you pick it up as nursery stock or you get told by someone else. It's like, unless that person's actually planted the seed, it's almost impossible to gauge the age of a tree. You get something that's being collected in the wild. Yeah, again, you're really just guessing. It could have had the first 30 years, 40 years of its life in terrible conditions, been stunted because of climate. Maybe there was a larger tree growing above it for one point or another. Who knows? Maybe bloody deer came through the area and ate it to the ground for the majority of its life. And then suddenly gets a really good growing conditions, grows well for 10 years, and suddenly comes out of the ground and you look at it and go, well, how old is it? Is it 10 years old because it's been allowed to grow for 10 years? Or is it 40 years old? Is it 50? Is it 100? It's so hard to put your finger on. You can do a best guess, but, even people that are around trees for a hell of a long time, like myself, you're only doing the best you possibly can when you're gauging the age of something. You can never put your finger on it. But I would strongly suggest never be disappointed when you find out the age of a tree. If you're drawn to it, you're drawn to it. It can be a very young tree, whatever that means, or it can be a very old tree again, whatever that means. But you look at your lifetime of doing bonsai or being involved with bonsai. Let's say you start when you're mid-20s, which is a pretty common age, mid-20s, even a bit later, but let's say mid-20s. You do it till you're 75, you start growing trees. When you start, at best, by the time you stop working with your trees, they're sort of 50 years old if you've started them from scratch. Let's say you've bought some nursery stock, 60 years old, 70, 80 years old. But, you might go and buy an older tree that maybe was started sort of 50 years ago, second generation sort of trees, which is what's coming around now. Second, not necessarily third generation, but second generation trees are around. They sort of crack it to 100 by the time you pass them over. Yeah, that's nothing to be sneezed at. But for me, age is just a perception thing. It should be when you look at the temperature and they say, oh, it's 27 degrees, feels like 29 or feels like 16 when the wind's blowing. Whatever it is, it should be a feels like age for our trees. It's 20 years, but feels like 55. Yeah, perfect. Like, let's go with 55 because whatever it feels like the age is, that's what the age is of the tree. Unless you've got a really old tree that's got very young bark on it and never seems to age in the trunk department, which can happen as well. But when we look at the trees, I would strongly suggest being very content with how old you feel the tree is. There's definitely things we can do to help with the appearance of age. Some things like I talked about earlier, branch angle. Branch angle definitely plays a massive part in the feeling of age of a tree. Proportion plays a big part as well. Taking that photo with no reference points whatsoever, and then not knowing whether it's 10 meters tall or 10 centimeters tall makes a massive difference to the feeling of age of the tree because it's in perfect proportion. Often younger trees don't have that perfect proportion. The formation of the apex, I I know apexes, they can be difficult to get your head around and to develop, and takes a bit of skill and a bit of time. But you look at young trees have a really sort of pointy apex. Trees grow to their maximum height. They can sort of push nutrients from their root system up to the top. Then the apex starts to round out. So older trees have a a more rounded than pointy appearance in the apex. Some of them, not all of them, not all. I know there's definitely you're shouting at the car at the moment, or your AirPods saying, no, there's definitely this tree keeps a pointy apex. I agree, but look around you where you are now. You'll see that trees will get to a point, they'll hit their maximum peak, whatever it is, and then they'll start to round off. And even conifers that may have sharper tops, they do start to round out more as they get to their maximum height, if they've got one. No, some trees don't. This is a grey area of doing this podcast. There's no absolutes with anything, but that formation of the apex for me makes a massive difference with the feeling of age. The other is the nebari, the base roots. Young trees, stock coming from nurseries, whatever. Normally the trunk's half buried, and that root system starts to form under the underground. But when you go walking through the city or a park or whatever, you look at the nebari on the old trees and you go, wow, everyone does. No matter whether you're into bonsai or you're just a nature lover, or you're just someone who walks through a park or walks down a footpath and sees an old tree that's, boxed in both with footpath and road all around it, but the nebari is spread and started to bubble over the edges of that, and it's really smooth. It's like, that's got to be old. Everybody says that. It's got to be old because the nebari, the base root system, has spread so far, and it takes a long time for that to happen. So the nebari has a massive part to play when it comes to the perception of age, and we do work on the nebari from the time you get young seedling. I'm thinking of say a black pine, where we take it out, you grow the seed. As soon as it starts to get to a certain point with the trunk, when it's still as thin as a couple of mil thick, the trunk, we take it out and we cut the taproot off, and it starts to form its nebari. The side roots start to spread, and it's really important from day one that we work on getting rid of the taproot and starting to form the nebari. It spreads the beautiful base of the tree. It starts to give the appearance of age from a really, really early point. And every time we repot, it becomes massive as well. The other thing is ramification. And ramification, that takes time. So as we're developing, we trunk nebari, get onto the primaries, we work our way through the secondary branches, we start to get to the ramification, we start, as soon as it starts to grow, we're cutting, we're getting that fine twiggy growth, we're starting to fill out our pads, our apex is starting to form nicely at that point as well. We're starting to get that real appearance of age. We're going, yeah, my structure's really starting to get there. The tree's starting to look older now because it's got ramification. And you know what's happening in the background as we're doing all that work on our ramification? Bark is starting to form as well. So the tree is starting to compound and get older because you know what? It is getting older. Every year we develop the ramification. The bark is naturally forming on the trees as well. And the tree is starting to take on an older form because it is getting older. So I would never, ever, ever be disheartened because you look at a tree and think it looks young, because it's not about now, bonsai lovers. It's about somewhere in the future. And it may be well after we're turned back into tree food ourselves that this starts to take on a form that we go, that is old. I can tell that is old. It might not have the best branches, it might not have the best apex, but the tree suddenly gets old because it is old. So work on the perception of age, do all the stuff that we have to do with our shaping for horticultural reasons, which go hand in hand with making a tree feel older anyway, and just let time do its thing. Always keep a smile on your face. And, when someone asks you that's not in the bonsai world, how old's that tree? Just throw back at them, how old do you think it is? And whatever age they give back to you, yeah, that's close. It's probably just a bit older than that. It's whatever age they think it is, plus 10 years. Just throw that into the mix, because age, it really is not something which is first and foremost for me with the trees. first and foremost is that beauty of the tree and letting things happen by themselves, and wanting to be around trees that are in my collection because they are pretty, they're beautiful, and they're designed to give a feeling, a moment in time. They're designed for so many different reasons, but age, I don't know, I started by asking if age is all it's cracked up to be. And yeah, look, it is. Is it the be all and end all? I've seen a lot of really, really beautiful trees, beautiful bonsai that aren't that old, that I would have over an old tree any day of the week. You know, you can't force age onto a tree. Just got to happen like us. But you know, the styling, the artistic side of it, yeah, sure. There's plenty of beautiful younger bonsai than I've seen that are, you know, some scrappy old trees that haven't had that artistic work done on them consistently for a long enough period to make them into the beautiful tree that they are. That's it, folks. Thanks for listening in. Another episode come to a conclusion. I do appreciate you listening in. Thank you very much, as always. Enjoy your week in bonsai. I'll be back next week with another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. As always, consistently pumping out enough to send everybody to sleep about bonsai. No, I'm glad I get the positive feedback that you enjoy it, and at different bits and pieces at different times resonates with people. Sometimes the podcast may not hit a note with you, other times it may. That's how I'm designing it. I'm trying to have a broad reach so that everybody can get something out of the podcast. Enjoy autumn too. It is going to be a beautiful time with the colour that comes through. You know, I know I was recently up at a place in country Victoria called Bright, and it's got to be one of my most special places during autumn, when the leaf colour starts to change, and there are plenty of places like it. I know that, but it's a lovely time to maybe plan some trips to get to areas where there is beautiful colour. A lot of people travel to Japan. I've been there myself for the autumn leaf colour, which is spectacular. But I guarantee you that the southern parts of Australia, there's some magnificent places to get around to have a look at them during these colder snaps that are coming through, and will continue to come through before the trees head towards dormancy. You should start seeing some new growth at the moment as well on the trees. The buds starting to move. That's common. It always happens that there's a bit of a push for growth before the trees turn the corner and hightail it towards dormancy. So it means that fertilising the trees is super important, really, really important during this autumn period. It's more important than spring as far as I'm concerned. So make sure you are onto it. Don't let it go. Get started sooner rather than later. If in doubt, I always think that fertilising earlier rather than later is better. I'd rather get a few extra days, a few extra weeks in for fertilising than let them slip past. That's how important it is to me. And I do fertilise on the heavier side for my exotics. I do like to push as much fertiliser into them as I possibly can, even though it's not something that I'll necessarily see at this time of the year. But it's the strength of the tree that I'm really, really focusing on at this time of the year. So get onto it. Whatever method, whatever regime it is that you're going to be using, then just make sure that you're consistent and you stick with it. Don't just do it once and turn your back on it. It's something that's got to be done on a very, very regular basis, depending on your methodology. So put your effort into it, because I guarantee your trees will love you for it. And next spring, post the winter dormancy, post the winter period, they will be jumping out of their skin, much stronger than what they were before they went to sleep. Another thing that drives me nuts at the moment is weeds. And weeds, you've got to keep them in check, because you're going to be fertilising. There's plenty of water, moisture, but going to start coming around the place as well. These weeds are just going to pop up everywhere. And don't forget, the best time to get rid of a weed is when it's tiny. Don't wait for it to take over the pot before you start plucking them out. And for me, to put a bit of a smile on my dial, I go around with a little blowtorch and burn the bastards, because they drive me insane. And it's far more enjoyable than trying to pull these things out, which you can't depending on what type of weed it is, unless you completely remove the entire root system, you're on a hiding to nothing. So I do tend to give the trees a bit of water and then go around with this little blowtorch and burn the weeds off. Make sure you stay away from the foliage, the trunk. You will kill parts of the trunk off if you get too close. Again, that's experience talking for you. So I do try and make sure that I am on top of that. Anyway, have a great week in bonsai. I will see you, or you will listen to me next week, hopefully, with another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. Thanks for listening in, and until next time, as always, happy bonsai.